In this video, we're going to look at the policy of the ESV on updating their text. I don't know how many of you know this, but the ESV in 2016, they came out with an update where they said, I believe they actually termed it the permanent text. And they said their intention was to never change the text so that they would have a stable text for the ESV that people wouldn't be worried about it being changed. But they actually backtracked on calling it the permanent text. And here is a statement that they made about that in 2016. I'm going to read some of it for you here so you can see their policy. Before I read it, I do want to say that when I heard that they are going to wait before they update their text, actually there's a part of me that has concerns, and I'm going to talk about that in this video. But reading the statement, I actually was really encouraged with the things that they said about updating the text of the ESV. And I actually think the ESV in many ways has been a good example of how you should approach textual updates for your translation. So I'm going to read some of this here and contrast it with some of the other translation approaches. So here's the statement on the ESV from Crossway. In 2016, August 2016, we posted on our website that the text of the ESV Bible will remain unchanged in all future editions printed and published by Crossway. The goal behind this decision to make the text permanent was to stabilize the English Standard Version, serving its readership by establishing the ESV as a translation that could be used for generations to come. We desired for there to be a stable and standard text that would serve the reading, memorizing, preaching, and liturgical needs of Christians worldwide from one generation to another. We have become convinced that this decision was a mistake. We apologize for this and for any concern this has caused for readers of the ESV. And we want to explain what we now believe to be the way forward. Our desire, above all, is to do what is right before the Lord. It's interesting that one of the things they say here is that the statement that they made on a permanent text has potentially, at least the way I'm reading it here, caused concern for readers of the ESV. So maybe there was actually a reaction to them stating that the text would be permanent. Now, often you'll hear people react when a publisher says they're going to update a translation. But in this case, it seems that there was actually a reaction to them saying that they would never update their translation, and that maybe that, as they say here, did cause concern for some readers. But it goes on here, our goal at Crossway remains as strong as ever to serve future generations with a stable ESV text. So that's encouraging. They are saying they do want to have a stable text. But the means to that goal we now see is not to establish a permanent text, but rather to allow for ongoing, periodic updating of the text to reflect the realities of biblical scholarship, such as textual discoveries or changes in English over time. So I want to pause here and just say that they are acknowledging that maybe the best approach here is to allow for ongoing, periodic updating of the text. That did give me a little bit of concern thinking about that, because I've seen what happens with other translations when you wait for a long time and then you make an update. But they do say something here that is encouraging, so let me finish. It says, these kinds of updates will be minimal and infrequent, but fidelity to Scripture requires that we remain open in principle to such changes as the Crossway Board of Directors and the ESV Translation Oversight Committee see fit in years ahead. So they're saying that there will potentially be updates, but they will be in the future, and they will be minimal and infrequent. And that was given by the CEO of Crossway, Lane Dennis, back in September 2016. So what they're talking about here really gets into something I've talked about before on my channel, that when a translation comes out, a lot of times there will be tweaks to the translation, initial updates that we could just say are preliminary updates to the translation. And then a lot of times the translation committee will wait years and years, and then they will do what could be considered a generational update, an update that has more to do with language change or major discoveries that take place over a longer period of time. So it sounds like the ESV is saying here that they're going to do no more preliminary updates and they're waiting to do something that is more of a generational update. That's kind of how I first heard it, but then as I was reading it there, I noticed that they said that the changes would be infrequent and minimal. So that is encouraging because, as I said, I hinted at earlier, I think other translations have gone down the road of once they've done their preliminary updates, they've waited years and years, and then they've done a generational update, but the update is so major that it tends to cause a division in their user base. So here's the thing, I think in theory, it sounds like a good idea not to do little updates and to wait a long time, but I actually think that the track that the ESV has taken so far, doing more minimal updates, is actually better and creates a more unified user base. I actually want to show here the most recent update of the ESV. You have really here 52 total changes in the entire Bible. And what's good about this is that when you make these changes, because they're not highly significant and there's not that many of them considering the large text of the Bible, making those kinds of changes doesn't really divide your user base. And I've seen this in practice. The ESV has had updates over the years from the year 2001 all the way till 2016. There were periodic updates, but while people may have reacted to some degree, it didn't really divide the user base and people still see the ESV as the ESV. Whether you're using a 2001 edition or 2007 or 2011 or 2016, it's still the ESV. But if you compare that to other translations, like the NASB, for example, it did its preliminary updates, and then it kind of culminated in 1977. That was really the end of the preliminary updates, I would say. And then in 95, they did a major update, a generational update. And I think you had people that said, no, I'm sticking with the NASB 77, and other people that went to the NASB 95. And this happened even more recently with the NASB 2020 generational update, where you had even, I would say, a greater division in the user base of the NASB. We can think of the NIV. That certainly happened. The preliminary updates, I think it was completed in 1978, updated in 1984, and that wasn't a big deal. But when they did that generational update in 2011, that actually did divide the user base, and there were people who no longer wanted to use the NIV anymore because of the 2011 update. And I could even say the same thing about the CSB, which I like that translation, but if you compare the HCSB and the user base of the Holman Christian Standard Bible when it came out in 2004, and then what happened in 2017 when the CSB updated the HCSB in a major way, it divided the user base. So I don't like these major updates, partly because it divides the user base and also because it can really change the nature of the translation to such a degree that people feel it's not the same translation anymore. And so what I'm saying in all this is, up to this point, I think the ESV has done a good job. I think the statement that they made here, at first I was like, oh, so they're saying they're going to wait and then do an update. And my concern is, are they going to do a major update that's going to involve the problems that I've been talking about in this video? But as I look at their statement here, I am encouraged to see that they do want to allow for ongoing periodic updating of the text. I think that's totally fine, but it says these kinds of updates will be minimal and infrequent. And as long as the ESV committee sticks to minimal and infrequent updates to the ESV text, I actually think that's going to be great, and it's going to keep a much more unified user base, a stable text, and I think that's a real strength of the ESV. It's one of the major complaints about other modern translations is that they change too much, too significantly, and it makes it harder for people to see that translation as having continuity and something that they've always used and they always want to use. The ESV here, I think, is really taking a really good pathway, and they already have, I think, proved that if you make minor updates and they're infrequent and minimal, it's not that big of a deal. So let's hope that the ESV sticks with this. I'm curious as to what all of you think. Feel free to leave your comments and thoughts in the comments section. But I just wanted to share some of my thoughts here and kind of praise the ESV for this approach, and I hope that they will stick with it. So thank you so much for listening to some of my thoughts here from A Frisch Perspective.